Before we get the panel going, one of the things that, as we were looking at what we could do for a keynote, a lot of times keynotes for 1 hour is just like, one person talking. I have ADD, so I kind of fall asleep easy. So we started thinking about panels, and we're like, what can we do? And we kind of looked at like, open source is really driving the world right now as far as all these technologies, but what actually makes open source happen? And it's about maintainers and contributors. So what we decided to do was look at, hey, who are some of the top contributors in the world? I like to say that. And who could we get to come talk? And we started looking at the list, and it's like, wow, we got some great people right in the United States that do so many great things. So I'm very happy to have Ryan Zarama, Commerce Guys. Give him a round of applause. Damien McKenna, Media Current. Jacob Rockerips, J-Rock. Big Blue House?
What?
What do you call this? Big Blue House? Big Blue House?
No, J-Rock, which is fine.
All right, J-Rock's good.
I have no problem with that.
All right, great. So we'll start with you, Ryan. Can you give us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, yeah. Is this on?
Power on, panelists,
Sweet
power
for
on.
a wired mic to have a power button. I'm powered on. So I'm Ryan Zarama, the president of Commerce Guys. We spun out from our joint company where I was tied with Platform.sh for a while. And we focus just on Drupal commerce. So we like to say we engineer simpler solutions to the hardest parts of selling online. And we do that by maintaining the Drupal commerce module, but also dozens of other contributed modules in the ecosystem. We also contribute heavily to Drupal 8. I personally am still doing the Drupal 7 module maintainership, so my guys don't have to. And we try to contribute in other communities in other ways as well. Perhaps maybe the one fun thing we like to say is that we are now part of the Android SDK through our work in e-commerce to improve their address format and validation rules.
Cool.
I guess this mic is on. So I'm Damien McKenna. I'm the community lead at Media Current, a local dev shop. And I've been involved with Drupal for some time. And I lead maintenance on the meta tag module, some others like Panelizer. And you might say I hop around the issue queue a little. Thank you. But I tend to take contribution from or actually development as a whole from a contrib first perspective, and it tends to lead to writing an awful lot of small little patches and helping out, and it's kind of part of my process. So that's me.
Hi, I'm Jake Rockwitz. I feel like I'm going to go backwards and say, I'm the web form guy. That's the history behind that is I work for Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center in the city as a consultant, and they were one of the largest early adopters of Drupal 8, and part of their project needed a web form-like solution. And some people in the room will know that I contributed YAML form back to the community, and then for a year I worked on that and then shifted over into the web form namespace. I've been using Drupal since Drupal 6. And what's interesting is I never touched Drupal 7 code at all. I've never launched a Drupal 7 site in my life. And that was kind of the inspiring thing about Drupal 8, was just moving from this functional spaghetti code, for lack of a better word, to D8. And that's pretty much my history.
Awesome. What version of Drupal did you start with?
My first module would have been written for Drupal 4.6.
Ooh, 4.
So you still had to put forms HTML into your module if you wanted a form on the site. So.
Wow. Anyone in here before 4.6?
Is Ken Rickard here? He would be.
Wow. So you're an OG.
Yeah.
How about you, Damon?
I first started working with Drupal like the month 5.0 came out. I helped somebody with a project, and they had been debating, are we going to stick with 4.7 because it's stable, or 5.0 because Form API is in it, etc. And they went with 5.0, so I didn't touch Drupal 4 until a couple of years ago. I had to do an upgrade to D7.
4 to 7.
Colorful. Yeah.
All right. Well, so first question. So just so you know, I'm my questions are on the phone. I'm not just sitting up here. You know what I
This
mean?
man reads from a card.
Right. I'm just not sitting up here scrolling, looking at my Tinder account. These are actually real questions. All right. So, what does a Drupal maintainer and co-maintainer mean to you? Let's start with in the middle. Damon.
Oh, so to me, it's maintaining or co-maintaining is is helping to push something along more than just writing an occasional patch. It's where you realize we've got all these patches for a module that we're using, and instead of juggling half a dozen, how about we see about committing them? And more often than not, which is how I ended up with co-maintaining so many, the maintainer says, I don't have time right now, here's access. So,
Unless you're working with me, then I just don't review your patches and I don't commit them. And you have to ping me on Twitter to make sure that they that they get in.
or you commit them and forget to test it and then realize, oh, it breaks your site. Let me release another fix.
Commerce Discount 7.x 1.0 beta, for example, added an accidental dependency.
Meta tag 7, I think it was 1.8 or 1.9 did that. If you had the verification module enabled, it blew up your site.
So being a maintainer means making mistakes.
Yes.
So, how about you, J-Rock? What does being a maintainer mean to you?
Well, I mean, I came from kind of this unique perspective because Webform really hit this like brick in the road of it wasn't getting ported from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. And it was because, I mean, it's very reasonable what happened. The maintainer of the Webform module moved on to do different things. That happens in this community. But I think it really illustrates how important a maintainer is to a project, especially like Webform, because as soon as that happened, the project, this whole concept of moving it kind of stalled. There were lots of people with goodwill in the issue queue saying, I want to help. Some initiative from even large companies stepping in, putting a week in to see what they could do. And it kind of highlighted in the community, especially in Drupal 8, where people have to take the lead and be overseeing the quality. And to me, a lot about maintaining a module is quality, like overseeing it, making sure it works. In D8, making sure there's tests, which is kind of an interesting thing for all three of us, is I think we're all sold on that concept of test-driven development. And it's overseeing it, also having a vision for the product, like what are you building, how's it going to work, who's your target audience. And another thing I've also learned in the process is that you also have to shift. You have to think, you have to be open to change and change direction and listen to people. And I mean, I also inspired by just working with, the community, like lots of people, wrangling the cats of the Drupal community and being active in the issue queue. And I mean, I think that's a really key. You're not a maintainer unless you're active in your issue queue and you're committing patches and listening to the community. Then you're just someone writing code.
Are you putting me on blast?
I'm putting the community on blast. I'm making a point about that's a really important role in the community. It's like emphasizing that importance in modules. The maintainer is the key person to make things happen. And the modules that we're having struggles with have an issue with maintainership. And I think co-maintainership is another direction for certain modules, and that solves certain problems. I mean, there's those two options. I also love that Drupal has two ways that modules can be maintained. You could have 3 people doing it, 1 person doing it, a company, which I feel like Commerce Guys does with a lot of the modules, is you own a module, but you're passing it between a couple of people. And that makes it, one, not boring, and people involved.
How about Ryan? What do you think about what does it mean to be a maintainer or co-maintainer?
It probably varies by the nature of the module. I think, as Jake mentioned with the Drupal Commerce project itself, a big part of just being a maintainer is considering the sort of total impact of adding a new patch or a new feature to a project that you oversee. Because I've had to turn away many patches and proposals and requests that were good ideas, but maybe wouldn't work at scale, because I know some of our users are doing millions of dollars in sales. Well, it may have worked for the guy that was doing thousands, but not this person, so we have to turn that away. Or maybe it works fine for a US user, but not a European user, so on and so forth. So having maybe a bigger picture understanding of what the module is trying to accomplish, and also how it interoperates with other modules in the ecosystem. So you have like modules at that size, but then you also have smaller modules where being a maintainer is just like scratching your own itch and putting it up there and then maybe answering a question every once in a while. So I think, of the variety of modules that I personally maintain, most of them are more like atomic features, not big projects like Drupal Commerce. But then also as a co-maintainer for a bigger project, I think empowerment is a big thing. So it's looking for people that you can empower and bring up alongside of you. Obviously, we kind of hold the reins pretty tightly for Drupal Commerce itself, but appointing Bojan Zivanovic, Bojan Z, to be my co-maintainer and the lead for the Drupal 8 version of the module was the best thing I could have possibly done, because I didn't have time to do it, and Bojan's smarter than me anyways, so why not? So that I think it can mean a lot. It kind of depends on what you're doing. But whenever I first started, it just meant I'm doing something kind of fun and it's worth sharing. So let me go create a project page on Drupal.org and put the code up there, because this is just how the community has always worked. So there doesn't have to be a huge barrier to entry. You could just write something, think it's neat, and want to share it, and go put it on Drupal.org. And that's like the way to get started. I think if I overthought it, I probably never would have tried.
No, I think it's a good question that you kind of bring up is like how many okay, so I'm maintaining one module. I'll just state that. Like I've dropped every module I've ever created, but it's amazing how many scratch my own itches modules that are out there. And easily my first module was kind of didn't work right, but I put it out there and just kind of, you just like, I got to do this. I got to try and see how it works, and you throw it out there and see if people use it. And some modules, I have modules with 1 user or 0.
Yeah, like I created the book search module when we had ubercart.org as kind of the community site for all of our ubercart users, and I didn't know what was going to happen with this module I was working on, but suddenly the webmaster for Raymond Feist, he's a fantasy author, if anybody knows him, he emails like, hey, I'm using this module to index all of the content on Crity.com. They're fans, and I was like, well, that's pretty amazing. I've been reading these books for years, and here I've now contributed to a project that they all need.
Just a side topic. It just hit me now. What's the craziest thing someone's ever asked you to commit? Did you get a commit with, pink ponies? Did you get a commit with, inappropriate pictures?
Andy, give me one of your patches.
For meta tag had a very unusual use case where somebody had a couple of 100,000 revisions on an individual node. A normal use case is a couple of 100,000 nodes, maybe a couple million. You can deal with that, but the revision system and using the normal APIs it does not work to that degree. It's a completely different ball game, I guess. But it was rather out there. Didn't commit the patch, but...
Yeah, for us, we don't necessarily get crazy feature requests that are just like completely abnormal, but we do get a lot of people that say, if you don't do this, your project is worthless.
I'll weigh in on that one, because I think that, like, to me in the issue queue, as I've been kind of, I really have just been getting heavily involved in the issue queue of the web form module, and it's not feature requests, it's actually criticism that shocks me sometimes, and you have to build a thick skin in the community. It's not, I had a criticism where it was like, the module is 5 megs, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I have an explanation. I'm not going to go into the explanation, but it's there in the issue queue, and I responded and said, hey, this is the explanation. And I closed the issue, and then 4 weeks later, the person reopens the issue and says, I was doing a code review, and you're writing too much code. It's making it difficult for me to use this in a project. And it was ridiculous criticism, but it happens. You're putting yourself out there, and that's just part of this community. And that's it's not a feature request. It's just surprising. Or, people don't get that I'm working for free, and they post something where they want it fixed immediately. Can you fix this now? And it's like, you've got to understand the community that you're getting involved in.
Cool, great. So we were talking earlier. What's unique actually about being, compared to other open source projects, what's unique about being a maintainer in Drupal? Damien?
So one of the things I find best in the Drupal community versus many others is that an individual person does not does not own a project forever. Somebody else can come along and say, "Hey, I'll take over this namespace." So the project is the primary thing, not the person, which lets somebody step away. For example, go off and build a completely different CMS and let somebody else take over. Or say...
Backdrop, just in case you didn't know.
Or say you get married, have a family, move to a different country, go on military leave, who knows what, become ill and have to step away, and you just don't have the energy for it anymore. There are processes in place for other people to step up and run with it for a while. And they can run with it for a month, run with it for a couple of years, however long they're comfortable with, and then pass the baton to somebody else. So there is no, they aren't tied to an individual person. Whereas with a lot of projects in the GitHub world, for example, are tied directly to a person. If they happen to change their name, decide I don't want to have this anymore and delete the repository, as happened this past week with the coder module, which broke Drupal core builds, there is no process in place to pass off a namespace to somebody else.
Can I talk about the namespace thing? Because you reminded me, one of my favorite presentations was by Dave Reed did this presentation. I'm just describing who Dave Reed is. He's someone who's contributed a massive amount of modules to the Drupal community. I think it's up to 80 to 100. And his skill is he's just such a tight, amazing programmer that he could spend 2 days on a module, write it, it's perfect, it works. You come to it and you know it's a reliable piece of code. But he did a session where it was like the Dave Reed module giveaway, where he's up there talking about how he's got to change his life. He has kids, life evolves, and he went around giving out index cards of different module names to people to be like, okay, you can have this one. And it also leads, we're going to talk about burnout, but it's a really interesting thing that the community, that allows the community to address it some way, because you can hand off things, and people come in and out of projects, especially core. People will work on one release cycle core and then step back. Anyway, sorry to digress into that one, but I thought it was a good one. Ryan?
Yeah, I think related to the project and the code is what matters, not over the maintainer, is the idea that we have a big focus on interoperability, a rabid opposition to the direct monetization of modules a la WordPress, Magento, etc. And that leads our modules or kind of creates a more collaborative, interoperable environment. And I do think that's unique and worth like praising the Drupal community for, and appreciating as Drupal users that you don't have all these different silos of functionality. Typically when somebody creates a Drupal module, they want it to be working with rules and with views. They don't want to go and create their own views engine and promote that as a business opportunity instead. And that's what happens in other communities. So for example, within WordPress, if you used WooCommerce, like that is somebody's product and they are trying to sell it and directly monetize it and then sell themselves to WordPress. And so if you get involved in that ecosystem, well, if you wanted to use commerce modules written by, or plugins written by somebody else that had a separate, I think there's like a store plugin or something like, there's no guarantee these things are going to work together, and there's no guarantee that you're going to have a views engine you can use or a rules scripting language that you can use to improve the capabilities of your store. So that, I think, is unique to Drupal. I kind of teased that out at Drupal Camp Florida one year about how just by actually believing the GPL, taking it at its word, and not trying to create ways to get around it, we've created a more collaborative, open, interoperable environment. And then also I think there's like real opportunity for people within Drupal companies if you're looking to create a career in Drupal and not just use Drupal in your career. By maintaining modules, contributing, giving back, like that is a definite career path. And so since restarting Commerce Guys last year, I guess we kind of knew people that we wanted to rehire back into Commerce Guys, but at least one of them, he only came across our radar because he was contributing heavily to Drupal Commerce on Drupal 8. And we said, well, this guy seems to be really engaged. He knows what we're doing. He maintains other major Drupal Commerce sites. Would you like to come work with us? And he was more than happy to. And so now he's in a remote team that's just doing Drupal Commerce and just doing exactly what he wanted to be doing. So finding finding opportunity for yourself, I think, is maybe easier in our environment because we're not quite as large as like the WordPress plugin pool, where there might be a blue million people that are doing that, and many people who are doing that for $10 an hour because that's fine in the Ukraine or in India to work for that little. But for people that are trying to advance themselves as just a WordPress plugin developer, I'm not sure that is as viable a career path as a Drupal module developer and maintainer is.
There we go. So this is a crazy question. Like, first off, when do you sleep? Okay, because I see the issue queue. I see how quickly. One of the reasons why we picked these three is because there are a lot of maintainers out there that don't necessarily commit patches and interact and are very responsive, which we all understand. It's paid, but the three of you spend a significant amount of time in the issue queue. I think all three of you in the top 25 committers, I think, on that list that came out a while ago by Dries. So why would someone want to even volunteer this much time? Like, why do you want to do this?
I had nothing better to do when I started. I mean, when I started writing UberCart, I was still single, no children, no real obligations, a $400 a month rent check, and that was it. And so really just helping people was the goal. And connecting with people around the world who began to use code that I wrote to like create their family's business and lift themselves out of whatever their economic situation was, or create a career becoming an e-commerce developer because they could learn from me. That was really the motivation. So all of the work that I did has paid off, obviously, over the years. Maybe it's slower than if I'd gone to school, got a computer science degree, entered into a tech company, and worked my way up that way. But I feel like the experience I've gained, certainly the travel I've been able to do, the friends I've been able to make, has made it all worth it. And I actually kind of feel like I've been sleeping too much lately, so I'm trying to get back on the staying up till 2 a.m. thing. But realistically, because I run Commerce Guys and I have 3 children, I'm married, I don't have a whole lot of time during the day to do contributions, so that is coming after hours now. But it's still important to the business, but I also still just help making people successful in solving problems. So.
How about you, Damon?
That question has been asked of me before. But like I mentioned earlier, I build it into my standard development process so much that I tend not to do a whole lot outside of work. So I'm in a lucky position to have extra time during my work week on the clock to do contributions and things. But unless there's like a burning itch to look into something, to fix something, I'm lucky enough to be able to get most of my contributions done during the day. But at the same time, it is still a bit of a hobby. So I don't go to football games. And our kids go to bed fairly early, and so I'll...
Video games? I mean...
Can we stop the session and just learn how that happens?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get the kids... Yeah.
How do you get your kids to bed early?
Yeah.
Well, so what you do is...
But no video games? I mean, you don't play video games?
And it's not that much of a desire.
No Dungeons and Dragons?
That's kind of its own thing, because I'd like to, but
Okay.
that's not a 15-minute sit down, and
Okay.
that's more of a here, kids, go away. It's Saturday. We'll see you on Sunday. D&D can get rather involved, but at the same time, we've started playing D&D with a local group, and our kids are old enough that they can understand the mechanics, and our eldest is trying to be a DM himself. So, but I will sneak in 15-minute look at the issue queue, check for through the updates, respond to a few things in the evening or morning or whatnot. Have something playing on Netflix or Hulu or in one corner of the screen and looking through stuff on the other side. But kind of just a little bit builds up over time rather quickly.
And I'm an aspirational video game player, so I spend money to buy them, and then I get like an email from Stack Overflow that says, you got these 3 Drupal commerce questions. The game can wait. And then, yeah, so I need to stop hitting the Steam sales and humble bundles. And
I have found that Galaxy of Games, GOG.com, is great for collecting soundtracks. So I've got this huge collection of video games that I'm not sure I'll ever get to play, but I play the soundtracks all the time.
Well, we'll start with video games because I could say, yeah, I never thought I'd watch I don't play video games anymore. It's interesting, leads to like how I got involved a little bit, but it's like I had free time and I became like a master of Call of Duty 2. And that was, and then my kid started growing up and Halo, and now I just watch him play because it's too embarrassing and let go of that. But I kind of referenced the Call of Duty 2 because it was like, I'm doing this right now because I have the time. I am fortunate that I have a really good consulting gig in New York where I can make enough money and then put 20 hours aside to do the Drupal work. And 10 years ago when I was doing COD 2, or maybe it's 10 years old, that's what I did with my free time. But for this moment, I've decided that I want to do this. And my explanation is professional development. It's like reaching that, it's like a midlife crisis slightly. Look at your resume and be like, what does my resume say? It's a good thing to do. Look at your resume and be like, someone's going to read this and ask me questions from it in the interview. And you read over your resume and say, well, what's going to happen? And I was like, I would like it to be something very public, something different, something challenging. I mean, for me, what's been great about this process of doing the web form module, it's just a challenge. It's like changing how I do things. Being up here and presenting, I've never thought I would do. And it's amazing that Drupal offers that opportunity when you're doing it. And then a direct answer to why I can make commits so late at night is I'm a consultant. I've kind of figured out my workflow on when I get things done best. And sometimes 2 in the morning it's worth committing something. Sometimes I literally do. You will see commits at all these different phases. Sometimes I wake up really early in the morning and solve a problem for an hour. Sometimes I will stay up till 2 in the morning solving a problem. And I also know which types of problems need those solutions. Like sometimes you just need to hack into the evening. And sometimes I'll be sleeping and be like, I'll wake up and be like, oh, I could fix that right now for 15 minutes. And I will do. There's like some crazy commit from 2 days ago, which I won't even get into, but it was like, I couldn't solve that problem for months. I didn't have an answer, and then I finally was like, wait, I can just do it this way. And 2 in the morning, I'm just writing the code.
And maybe uniquely as a business owner that does a heavy contribution to Drupal, I'd say that we also do make time for it on the clock. So you can find, if you're interested in doing this, you can find work or projects that do lend themselves to contribution. So everybody on our team contributes to Drupal. For most of them, I don't think they do it after hours. For me, 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. is my magic window where I am productive. So that's when I'm usually doing code review. But the rest of the team, it's an 8 to 5 gig, and all of our projects, they're sponsored contributor module engagements. Like people will literally pay us to work on our modules, or to port them to Drupal 8, or do whatever. It's all about roadmap and prioritization. If they need a project delivered by X date and they don't have the staff for it, that's where we come in. So you actually can build the kind of business that you want to support that kind of work if you're interested. That is a possibility, or join one. So I mean, like I said, everybody on our team does that. And it's great to have people on my team that I can lean on to help maintain modules when I don't have the time, because I do more biz dev and legal and accounting and all that boring stuff now. So.
But I think commerce is in a really unique position because it's such a product in this community. Like it's concrete. We need it. People need it. All the sub-modules make a lot of sense. And I think the community is definitely struggling with these other things they fall into these gaps. Like rules would be a good one to bring up where it really needs to be done, but no one's going to be like, I'm going to sponsor that. That's going to solve my problems. And I don't know, I'm just bringing it up because it's an interesting, the community needs to figure this out, like how we maintain these modules and ecosystems and even defining what they are and being very honest. Like the rules thing is a good example where we need to be like, okay, this is a really important module, but it doesn't fall into a use case that someone's going to pay for it. and to sort that out. I mean, web forms, I feel, I took it on because I felt there is a similar case with commerce where there's proprietary systems that people pay for, and if you offer an open source solution, they will adopt it, and there's some opportunity there in the community. And that's one of the reasons I got so inspired by it, because you can compete.
You know, last night we were kind of chatting over libations, and it made me think about, we were talking about, was there a moment early on in your career that was kind of like an aha moment, a moment where you're like, that is super cool that XYZ is using the thing that I coded? You know, like, was there like a wow, a shock factor?
I had two, I guess. The first one was I had my background in OS Commerce, which was an early aughts open source e-commerce system. And I got to kind of write some plugins for that at the job I was at. And I wrote QuickBooks Online Importer, or sorry, QuickBooks Web Connector Importer. So you can go from your OS Commerce site into your desktop QuickBooks application via this new tool they created called the Web Connector. I didn't realize I was the first person to ever use it, and I was the first person to talk about it publicly because I was just like always been an open source guy. Before that, I was doing video game development using QuickBasic and FreeBasic, which was a QBasic derivative for those in the room that know. And so I just put it online, and suddenly like Intuit found out about it and named me like their geek of the week, you know, for doing this QuickBooks module. I was like, wow, this is really neat that this big company can take notice of some just little project that I created and released online. And then like a week later, because I'd blogged about it, I got like a freelance gig doing some QuickBooks work out of it. I was like, wow, this is like amazing how this all kind of works together here. You do something neat, nobody's done before, you talk about it, and you have now the opportunity to do more work on it. And then for UberCart, once we got that big, I went to DrupalCon Barcelona. This was my first ever Drupal event in 2007. And I didn't know anybody was using UberCart. Like, as far as I knew, I was kind of in a silo. I didn't really know how to engage the Drupal community because I'd always worked through random PHPB forums before in the QBasic community. I guess we're at time. And like everybody there had been using UberCart. I just didn't know about it. I hadn't found out how to connect with people yet. And that's when I started going to every DrupalCon and every Drupal camp I could to connect with people. And then find out people like Warner Brothers were using it at the time for like an Avenged Sevenfold fan club site. I was like, all right, that's awesome. So,
Avenged Sevenfold.
fun.
Good
Yeah.
band, good band. How about you, Damon?
So, it's kind of tangential, but well, one of the cool things was looking at a site and just purely on the off chance looking at the source code and going, they've got a ton of meta tags on their page, but they're in a really weird order. It's meta tag. Hey, they're using Drupal. That's all I can think of right now.
What was the site, man?
I forget, it was some major news site.
Okay, I'm just gonna say it was CNN.com.
But
I'm just gonna make it up.
yeah. But it was before Drupal 7 especially became a thing that large news sites used. And I hadn't realized they were using Drupal at all. And oh, hey, they've got Drupal. And then I think the whitehouse.gov site as well, when they switched over, it was known that they were using Drupal, and then realizing they've got meta tag. Oh, I've got code running on the White House website.
How about you, Rock?
Well, I think, you know, White House is running web forms, but they're running the D7 version. It's not my code. They're not on D8 yet. But I had hinted, you said that I had, the one that sat with me about like, and it kind of gets more into the opportunity of taking over the web form namespace, and that right now there's 500,000 users in D7, only 20,000 in D8, which, you know, that's going to change. But going to like the UNICEF site with my daughter after Halloween and making a donation, be like, that's a web form. And be like, they're probably going to migrate to the D8 version. And it kind of leads me like, for me, a big moment, aha moment was the fact that I built this module YAML form in this totally separate space on my own. And then this issue got created about renaming the module. And it's a great issue because it shows how this community works, including negative feedback. You know, like, some people the wrong tone, some people with the right tone. I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take over such a big project. And Nate Quicksketch stepping in and be like, it's not a big deal. You could have the name. First of all, I didn't even want to ask him for the name because I respected what he did in D7. I said, well, that should die with him. And he's like, no, that his attitude was totally open source, and that's a namespace, and it's in the community, and it should continue, and you should take it over. And he's like, you'll figure this out. And that was a big aha moment to be like, well, I can do this and take over this space in the Drupal community.
Awesome, awesome. Well, can we give everyone a round of applause? Give everyone. We're gonna open this up for questions. This is your opportunity. I mean, to ask maintainers themselves. We're gonna open this up for questions. Mike has the microphone. Here we go, mic to mic.
What's your biggest pain point with module development? As far as tooling on Drupal.org, and that's it.
Not being able to just keep people from reopening issues. We have a lot of issues that just come back over and over and over. Yeah, this is
Sorry.
dead.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with.
I do that a lot too.
I mean,
I
I
do that a
wrote a blog post about like wrangling the issue queue, and I'm still struggling with it. And I'm even coming up with canned text to put in reopen issue, like moving people onto Stack Overflow, or if they have a general support question, just wrangling it and And I'm doing the best I can, but I'm nervous. If I had 500,000 people using the web form module, how do you coordinate all those comments, feedback, duplicate issues? Something broken, I must have had 3 people file the same issue within an hour. So yeah, that's a big pain point. I don't know how Drupal.org can fix that. I think education maybe.
Along the education line, I think a key pain point with many is the workflow, that people are more used to the GitHub and Bitbucket pull request process of going off.
Which we all agree is subpar, right?
It's different. And it okay.
Whatever, Brian.
So
Shave your beard.
But it's getting over the initial learning curve and anxiety over working with these patch files, having a local checkout of the code base where you can actually do it and you're not uploading a file off of your project website. And getting people over that initial learning curve and getting them used to the patch process is a huge deal. Can I plug something?
Do it.
Okay. So internally at Media Current, we've been having a weekly contrib call amongst whoever has time for it. After 2.5 years or so, year and a half, 2.5, I can't remember.
What kind of watch is that?
What year is it? It's
Kind of.
2 hairs
Is that
past a freckle.
that new Apple Watch?
Yeah. And it's so tiny and everything. I mean, so we realized that it was the way I had structured the call meant that people were only joining the call if they had something specifically to talk about. They weren't joining to just hang out and learn stuff. So we're going to be relaunching it hopefully this coming week, maybe the week after, depending on, to be more of a presentation QA style. And the big thing, though, is it's going to be opened to the community, kind of like the accessibility group joined together with other people in the community to have an open community accessibility meeting every month. We're going to have a weekly half-hour call that will do a bit of a demo. Here's some of the processes you can do. Here's some of the stumbling blocks you'll run into. Here's how to work around them. And then some Q&A time. And I'll be posting full details this coming week on our blog.
Cool concept. Cool concept. Any other questions? Let's keep them rolling.
Hey, I think you already just answered it, kind of. But thank you guys so much. It's great to hear your wisdom and beauty up there. So, what is the solution for the patch workflow? Because it is painful, and I know the question has been rehashed so many times on Drupal.org, and it's been brought up. But what's the current state of the D.O infrastructure? I mean, is there a push to switch to like a private GitLab instance, or what?
So they're working on testing some things, and they've been doing some internal setup and finagling, trying to work out what options are available. To lead into that, a couple of years ago, the then CTO of the Drupal Association, whose name I don't remember right now, worked with a bunch of people to work out, of all of the stuff that we have on Drupal.org, how much of it actually is there? What are the different things that we have running this whole system? And from there, what would be the effort if we were to take on migrating to using GitHub for everything? And when they put it all together, it was an astonishing amount of stuff. With release management, with the testing infrastructure, with all of the different bits and pieces they have, the security workflow, and they realized that in the end it was, first of all, there's an awful lot of functionality that doesn't exist on GitHub that they have right now, including the security processes. And also, even if they had the functionality, it would be the development cost to migrate everything over was going to be about $1.5 million of development to fund. And at the time, they were just after migrating Drupal.org to D7 and trying to work out what are our next long-term goals. And it just did not seem worthwhile to put that much, to first of all try and come up with the funding for that, and then to put that much effort into this one thing. So what they've been doing instead is looking at improving some things along the way to make life a little easier. So right now you can do per issue branches. So if you create a branch on your project, name it with an issue number, it comes up in the sidebar. But they're also looking at a more long-term thing of possibly trying out GitLab. And they're doing some internal testing with that, and the plan is
That testing failed.
It did?
Yeah. There's a blog post on the Drupal Association blog that kind of goes through like all the testing, a lot of the history, and I can't remember the exact reasons. Yeah, but that kind of has the rundown. So the game plan right now is Drupal.org, continuous improvement, but for me the patch workflow is still substantial in that you can actually collaborate on a patch. You can't really collaborate on a PR, and if I go and delete my sandbox, there goes the PR. So that's kind of a big hurdle that would require these other tools like GitLab or GitHub or even Bitbucket to tool up to be able to support collaborative patch development, I think.
A lot of this is all tied to documentation, just like getting people familiar with. It's a struggle, but you got to teach them the patch process. Even the fact now you should use Composer, and they added a little link to show you how to download a module using Composer when you're looking at a release, and it's education. I talked to Neil a lot, and it seems like a daunting task to move over to GitLab.
Cool. Another question. We're going to go with 2 more questions, and then I'm going to tell you about lunch.
Hello? Oh, there we go.
There you are.
First of all, thank you for sharing your experience and all of your time and expertise with the community. I really appreciate it, personally. So my question is actually about Composer. How do you feel like Composer has changed the way that you think about contributing back to the community or contributing to your modules, or maybe even in the future, creating new modules?
Address module, Mr. Composer.
We require it. The end.
Not really. Ludwig,
Yeah, we created a workaround. I mean, I'm not sure that Composer itself has this huge impact, other than the fact that it finally puts us in line with the rest of the Drupal world for dependency management. And as I tell people, like, if you don't have a dependency management tool like Composer or NPM or whatever else you're using, then you are the dependency manager and you are not dependable. So Composer is really like just another tool that we should all be learning. And if you don't have the ability to learn it in the short term, you can use workarounds like Ludwig, which is a module we created that functions similar to the libraries module from Drupal 7. But really would recommend learning Composer. And then, you know, I guess as a module developer, it makes it easier for us to include third-party modules. So all of our payment gateway modules now in Drupal Commerce use third-party SDKs. And we have the Composer file that pulls in that SDK instead of creating essentially a custom SDK in the Drupal module itself, which is what we did in Drupal 7 and before.
Jake?
I think Composer is like a standard thing. I mean, I'm struggling with the next part that leads from Composer is that goes great stuff for PHP, but we've got to get our front-end libraries in order, our JavaScript, our CSS. I mean, the Webform module is actually implementing its own kind of libraries API just to manage these dependencies. And one of the things that I'm still digesting is Dree's keynote pointed out that 60% of the people don't do command line. And that's a barrier to Composer. Even I have a solution, you type one drush command, you get your 12 libraries. I see people who are still manually installing them. And we have to address that. I mean, I might actually go and create a GitHub repo that just has the 12 libraries, so I know someone doesn't have to navigate out there to 12 different sites to get the library, and just be like, well, take that zip archive and unzip it. Just to acknowledge we haven't solved this problem. Dries, I think his keynote was spot on that the community has to solve how you get people who are not technical, will never touch the command line ever, to install stuff. And I do think Composer, like, having external libraries is the key to Drupal 8. I mean, I'm a fanboy of external libraries. If someone solves a problem for me, I don't have to write it. Just to illustrate the best problem that was solved for me. I'm not that good at CSS, and I needed a progress bar across the top. And someone on GitHub, this is not JavaScript, just wrote a perfect CSS library to show a progress bar. And I include it. And it solved huge problems. So that's my...
Cool.
Kind of working off of what Jake said, that I find there's, looking at the stats of how people are downloading modules on Drupal 7 and still in Drupal 8, the vast majority are doing it by going to the project page and doing the download zip or download targz, or curling it to whatever. But a huge amount are not ready for dealing with the command line. And Drupal is at an awkward balance in that we promote it as an easy-to-use system for building complicated systems that you can do an awful lot through the UI, but you're starting more and more to have to do things through the command line. There are some tools that are starting to crop up, like ComposerCat, and Matt Glemon wrote another tool for managing a Composer file. So there are some people standing up to try and fill that gap, but I think there's much more work to be done to make it easier, so we're not cutting off the huge portion of the community that are not skilled in using the command line.
Great. Well, we got one more.
Last question. All right. I'll just echo the thanks again. You guys have been interacting with at least two of you over the years in the issue queues for years. So thanks again for everything you do. My question is about buy-in from employers. So you really mostly, I guess, Damien's probably most applicable here, but like getting your agency that you work for to buy into like spending what could be billable time contributing back to the community.
I look at it from the point of view of it's an investment. It's a long-term investment in the tools that your business is using, and feel that if a company is relying on open source tools for their business, that they should be helping to ensure the tools stick around and are still there in a year, or never mind 5 years. And that I don't think it would take too much time out of an average company's productivity workflow to say, okay, let's spend an afternoon once a week. Say you get to the end of the week, Friday, let's relax a little bit and we'll let people scratch their own itches, and people go off and follow up on that 6-month-old issue to re-roll a patch to finally get it into core, so you don't have to deal with re-rolling the patch every time, or fixing bugs, or going off and discovering something else. Some of the best work that I feel has come out of my coworkers has started with somebody going, this doesn't work very well, and spending some extra time to dive into it even in great detail, and thankfully they've had project time that allowed for that, and they've usually been given extra time on the clock because it turns out to be a particularly worthwhile investment. So it's looking at it from the long-term perspective of, we want this stuff to be sticking around, and rather than relying on expecting other people to do it for us, we'll step up and make sure it happens.
So I have I agree with what you're saying about employers, but I think in the community, it also needs to come from the individual. I mean, because I'm not being paid, I don't have an employer doing this, I'm just doing it. And I think a lot of Drupal comes from individuals, people coming in and doing the work and understanding how this community works. And I mean, I'm starting to advocate like everyone should be a member of the Drupal Association, because that's the backbone of Drupal. And it's like educating people. So, I mean, like we were talking about companies that don't allow people to contribute. Well, you've got to have these people who are applying for jobs understand the importance of contributing to Drupal, that do it for their career, and they're even members of the Drupal Association, and say, this isn't free software, this is software that we're collaborating on, working together. I love it. I use it for my career. And it's like a mindset shift, because there's a lot of people in the community that just use it and move on. That's it. It's just a tool they install. And I think educating people more to understand how the community works, getting involved, will help with these employers finding the time for their employees.
If I could correct myself, it wasn't a blog post, but go to the recording from DrupalCon Vienna's public board meeting. That's where the update was given on infrastructure. So.
Damn you, Ryan. All right.
I just reopened a closed issue.
All right, so one more round of applause. Thank you guys so much. This was fun. I love you guys.